Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Sabrina Baptiste. I am the project director here at Innovate EDU, where I lead the Pathways Alliance. The Pathways Alliance brings together education, workforce policy, and preparation partners to expand high quality pathways into the educator workforce. We are excited to convene today's panel around a conversation around the newly released Pathways Alliance National Guideline Standards for Principal Apprenticeships. The NGSs we'll refer to today, they were developed as a national resource to help states, districts, and educator prep programs and other partners really think intentionally about how registered apprenticeships can really support aspiring school leaders. These are not a one size fits all model or an instructional manual. Instead, we are hoping folks really look at them as a strong blueprint that communities can really adapt to their own local context, needs, and systems. During today's webinar, we will provide a brief overview of the Pathways Alliance Principal NGS. We will explore how states and districts and educator prep programs can really use these guidelines to design and strengthen principal apprenticeship pathways. And we will also hear directly from leaders who have built and implemented programs in the field. We are especially grateful to our panelists who are joining us today, who will share what this work really looks like in practice, the partnership it requires, and also the decisions they have had to make and the lessons they have learned along the way. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, and we will share the recording and the related resources following the webinar. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the session. Again, we are hopefully everyone is introducing themselves, but also please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions and also as a way to connect with others throughout the webinar. We also, again, welcome all questions in the Q&A feature. We will also reserve the time toward the end of our conversation to address as many questions as we can. But as they come up, we do encourage you to put them in a chat so we can also try to answer them throughout the session as well. We thank you again for being here and your commitment to expanding meaningful, supported pathways into school leadership. With that, I am pleased to turn it over to Lennon Audrey, who will provide an overview of the national guideline standards that the Pathways created for principals.
Thanks, Sabrina. Really excited to share with you all today. We worked on these standards as a group of folks from all various walks of life in the education sector, people who represented principals, individuals who work in schools and systems, individuals from principal preparation programs. But I think a big question always is, because we've introduced almost this new structure into the ways that we think about both, as you know, teacher apprenticeships, but now principal apprenticeships, we've introduced this new structure of an apprenticeship model. And a big question becomes, what is a national guideline standards? You've probably seen this document floating around. You've probably heard it abbreviated as NGS. And what the purpose of this framework is really to establish a recognized and scalable model for school leadership that combines both rigorous on-the-job learning, related technical instruction, and then a link in the education career ladder. So if we go to the next slide, I can dive in a little bit more. So what are NGS standards? What are national guideline standards? Well, really what they are at the U.S. Department of Education is a common national starting point. And so really think about it as a framework that we use and many other occupations also use when they are designing high quality registered apprenticeships. Out of field in education, this goes for plumbers and automotive workers and the other people who have registered apprenticeships. And in our context today, this is really about registered apprenticeships for aspiring K-12 principals. When you think about these standards, think about them essentially as a competency-based approach. But there's a little bit of if you're a big competency-based person, you're probably like, wait, the sentence right after that doesn't feel very competency-based. There is a little bit of on-the-job learning, at least 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning, and then a minimum of 144 hours of related technical instruction. You can think about that. The first part of that, the 2,000 hours, is almost like internships and shadowing and other things that individuals might engage with on the job. And then the related technical instruction, those 144 hours might be akin to what you might think of more commonly as coursework, and that these are both aligned with state or regional certification requirements. So this isn't introducing some new type of certification. This isn't introducing new standards necessarily. As you'll see in a minute, we actually use some existing standards to inform the development of these standards. But what we are trying to do is translate all of the various pieces of principal preparation that exist in the ecosystem to fit it into the U.S. Department of Labor's framework. And so principal apprentices are paid employees who learn alongside experienced mentor principals, and as a result, they earn progressive wage increases. And there's a maximum ratio in the NGS document that we collectively developed that a journey worker, a principal who is currently practicing as a principal, should have no more than two apprentices, two aspiring principals under them, to make sure that they get all the attention that they need. On the next slide, I talk a little bit more about this framework. And so, of course, we want two things. Every state has their own requirements for what it takes to become a licensed principal in their state. And so this is a document that we hope ensures that as if you are interested in creating an apprenticeship model, or aligning your principal preparation program to an apprenticeship model, that you understand the requirements that exist there. And so we want this document to not just be something that you are saying, oh my gosh, I've got to figure out a way to make this work in my context, but really almost like a reference guide to make sure that you understand the requirements of what goes into an apprenticeship, which may be above and beyond what you do in your current principal prep programs. And it details things like work process schedules, what kind of instructional experiences apprentices should have, mentoring requirements, wages, selection, assessment, and these are adaptable, but these are also a great starting point for a common framework for us to be discussing when we say apprenticeship in the state of Arizona. What do you mean? Well, we can have a common conversation about that because we're also talking about apprenticeships in California. Like we said, when you think about these as standards, you probably might think about them more as structural standards as opposed to content standards, because we really aligned this NGS to PEASL, to the Professional Standards for Education Leaders. And so we worked with lots of people to kind of distill how we marry the PEASL standards, really kind of what goes into the RTI and also into the technical instruction, into this document, so that as you are adapting it, you also have common reference points to a set of standards that you know. So again, think about these standards as more structural guidance as opposed to content guidance, because in part, most of the content is actually, what we think principals should know and be able to do, are a result of the PEASL standards that already exist. And so on the next slide, I think it's just helpful. I've been in a Q&A, FAQ era of my life. And so I think a myth and fact check on this is just also a helpful check for understanding. Myth. Following the NGS replaces state principal preparation or licensure requirements. That's our myth. Our fact is actually that apprentices still have to complete a state-approved preparation program, and they have to still complete all certification and licensure requirements. The NGS, again, are structural. If you want to count your program or make part of your program align with the apprenticeship, then these guideline standards are a great way to start working your structural features of your program towards that. Our next myth: principal apprentices must already be serving as principals to participate. Our fact is actually we don't really want that. We really want them in roles like assistant principals, deans, instructional coaches, or other appropriately structured leadership roles. We don't want them serving as principal of record during the apprenticeship. Much like in the teacher apprenticeship, we also don't want teachers necessarily always serving as teacher of record. And our last myth: every principal apprentice has to look the same in length, coursework, and progression, or sorry, principal apprenticeship. Our fact is, again, that these are a competency-based framework. Apprentices are progressing by demonstrating mastery, while related instruction and program design can vary based on prior experience, local partners, and the state certification requirements. So again, think about this as a document that, as you're thinking about your program, it doesn't take away all the certification requirements of your state. It doesn't take away the requirements of the program that maybe if you're located at an IHE, you necessarily have, but it might raise some questions that you then have to go explore. Well, how do we take this nationally recognized way of training individuals in lots of occupations and now marry it with the way that we've been training and preparing principals? And so with that, beyond the document, we have some wonderful panelists. So I'm going to pass it on to Tara to kick us off to our panel discussion.
Great. Thank you so much for that walkthrough, Lennon. It was really great. And Lennon and I had the privilege of co-chairing the working group that developed the national guideline standards, and we submitted them to the Department of Labor. There, I think many of the folks who participated in this work group are both here on the panel with us, but also here in the audience today. So I just want to give a shout out to all the folks who put time in over many months to really work through some of the technical aspects of the national guideline standards. And I am really honored to get to facilitate this conversation. We couldn't be talking about a more important topic. How do we strengthen preparation pathways for principals? The organization that I work for, the Learning Policy Institute, recently released a report. It's called The Principal Effect: How Investing in School Leaders is Key to Solving Education's Challenges. And the core thesis is really that, like, we're all going back to school right now, and school leaders are facing a series of challenges in schools: chronic absenteeism, declining student mental health, teacher shortages, right? The long-standing effects of pandemic learning loss. We could go on with that list, but policymakers typically are treating each one of those challenges alone in isolation, when there is a single factor that's the topic of our webinar here today, the principle, right? That's key to addressing them all, and it really goes overlooked in policy a lot. So I'm very excited that our conversation today is going to dive deep into the role of principal preparation. I'm going to introduce leaders from 3 states on this panel who will talk to us about their approaches to developing principal apprenticeship pathways in their state. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Joe Paralia is the Director of Principal Preparation Programs at the Center for Leadership and Education Equity in Rhode Island. Christy Maldonado is the Associate Dean for Assessment and Accreditation and the coordinator of the Educational Leadership Program at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee, and a member of our working group. Margarita DeSander is the Director of School Leadership and Professional Studies and the Principal Investigator of the U.S. Department of Labor AB2 grant at Western Kentucky University, the grant for principal apprenticeship. And Stacy Leggett is the Associate Professor at Western Kentucky University. And both Margarita and Stacy were also part of our working group. So Joe, I think I want to kick off with you in Rhode Island and ask you to tell us a little bit about Rhode Island's principal apprenticeship model, and really what was going on for you in Rhode Island that led you to launch the Registered Principal Apprenticeship this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this work representing Rhode Island Department of Ed and also our partner in the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training, Building Futures Rhode Island. So as a partnership together, we created an apprenticeship pathway. So our organization, CLE, has an existing approved principal preparation program called the Principal Residency Network that has been in existence for 25 years. We understand here in the state that our principal pipeline, it needs additional support, needs to be bolstered, particularly in the diversifying our pipeline. RIDE, using the ABA grant, put out a request for a proposal to develop an apprenticeship pathway for the state. Our model is I think it works really well with apprenticeship in regards to those structural standards that Lennon had talked about. We're residency based, we're mentor focused. So we applied for that grant, we were awarded that grant, and we developed a pathway in our existing program that was aligned to those structural standards in the NGS. Through that work, we launched in 25, 26. So last year was our first cohort of 5 apprentices. We have a 12-month program. And because we're residency based, we do have related instruction, and CLE, we are the related instruction provider. But a big focus is on the work that our apprentices are doing in their school context with the support of their mentor, who is the building principal. Our sessions that we have for related instruction are aligned to what we call as our core leadership practices, which are based on the Rhode Island Standards for Educational Leadership. And through that process, our apprentices demonstrate proficiency in competencies, which is aligned to their wage progression. So that's basically kind of just a huge overview of what our model is. The grant funding that is provided from RIDE which is the Rhode Island Department of Ed. It pays for our tuition, and it also pays for a licensure assessment administration, as well as the books for our apprentices. So there is no cost to the apprentice to be a part of this. And I think that financial barrier was a reality and a barrier for folks to enter the principalship. So the intention was to eliminate that barrier, that financial barrier. And through this work, we have 5 apprentices who completed our program or in the field, and we just started 26, 27 this cohort. We have 4 apprentices this year that we're really excited for that.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a really helpful overview. And a couple of my takeaways from it are just like you were building on a pre-existing model that was longstanding in the state, but we're able to leverage the federal ABA grant that came to Rhode Island Department of Education and then to your program to make this a cost-free preparation pathway for your apprentices, which is really exciting. I wonder if you could dig into the partnership topic for a little bit with us, because we know that partnerships are really critical to the success of strong apprenticeship programs, and they have to bring together what have not necessarily that have typically been siloed institutions, both the workforce development side and on education, K-12 and higher ed. And so tell us a little bit about how you establish those strong partnerships in Rhode Island, and if there are any lessons from that you think others might draw.
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate to work with the Department of Ed in Rhode Island, as well as Building Futures Rhode Island, which is a part of our Department of Labor and Training, to register the program together. So we worked on the competencies together. We went through all of those structural requirements within the NGS with a lot of support. So for example, wage progressions was new to us, and it's new to districts. And it's new to human resources in districts and how to kind of manage that process. And Building Futures was just extremely helpful in not just helping us understand how to build it into the program based on the demonstration of proficiency and the competencies, but also how to work with the districts and LEAs in order to make that a possibility with human resources. In addition, the Department of Ed developed an apprenticeship certification, which allowed our apprentices to serve in the role of an assistant principal or dean, and do everything that an assistant principal and dean can do before completing this program. So I think that was critical in order to work with districts to fill those vacancies and be a part of the program. Districts initially were unsure of that because it was so new. Like, the apprentice certification came out as we registered. So there's a lot of work that we had to do with our district partners as well, understanding, what our apprentices can do in their role and how the wage progression works in order to compensate them for the work that they're doing, which is a part of that apprenticeship piece. So without the support of Rhode Island Department of Ed, without Building Futures Rhode Island support, it would have been really difficult for us at CLE to just have those conversations with districts because it is so new. So that just has been really important and integral in this being successful.
Yeah. If I can ask a follow-up there, was there a regular meeting cadence with all of those agencies, or a particular convener that brought everybody together? What were the kind of nuts and bolts of how you brought all those institutions together to make it work?
Yeah, initially when we were developing the program, we met monthly, and it was Building Futures around Department of Ed and our team at CLE. and we would just set up some goals and just have some check-ins. And now that the program has launched, we still meet monthly to talk about some barriers such as recruitment, or if we are identifying districts that need additional support, ways that we can support them with understanding, how to develop a wage progression for an individual apprentice. We work currently with 4 LEAs, and we also worked with 4 LEAs last year, and each LEA has their own wage progression. Each LEA has their own process. So that was really important to have those partnerships and that support to help them make that part of apprenticeship a reality.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful. I'm gonna take us west to Tennessee to Christy and dig into a little bit of a different model. Christy, Austin Peay has really been at the forefront of registered educator apprenticeships. You were the first university, you were part of Tennessee's first in the nation U.S. Department of Labor approved registered apprenticeship into K-12 teaching just a few years ago, and we've seen that take off across the country. And you've also been on the leading edge of launching a registered apprenticeship into the principalship. So I wonder if you could also now tell us about Austin Peay's program and what implementation looked like for you last year. Give us that big picture overview of your model's design.
Yeah, so the Educational Leadership Program at Austin Peay actually went an initial overhaul back in 2020 with a grant from the state. And so we sort of had a pre-existing design before we moved into the apprenticeship. And that design was really based on, aligning with the Tennessee Instructional Leadership Standards. And it was intended to expand access across the state for school leaders. So the program's completely online. It's a 1-year program. They start in August. They graduate the next August. And so the coursework is a little bit accelerated beyond the typical graduate courses. And it was, so we had already done a lot of that groundwork. And so the next step in the evolution was to look into the registered apprenticeships. And we already had a pre-existing relationship with the state based on the first grant. And so we had a couple of the representatives from the state reach out and want to partner with us and launch in the first principal apprenticeship in Tennessee. So we had our first cohort come about in 2025, 26. And, it was interesting because we were able to capture 54 districts across the state of Tennessee that took advantage of this. And so we had apprentices. The number of apprentices per district varied based on the enrollment size of the district. So there was a funding model that was given. But we started with 119, and that was in addition to our 79 more traditional students that were already in the program. And so, we had 119 students, which also meant 119 sets of compliance paperwork with the Department of Labor. And so, I think our focus was on making sure that every district that we touched had the opportunity to apply for it, and nominate their teachers or school, aspiring school leaders, because the whole point was to respond to their needs, and what kind of needs did they have. And I think that was our initial communication. So in Tennessee, they do have the opportunity to get, it's called the ILLA, which is the Instructional Leader License for aspiring administrators that they can get upon enrolling in an approved program. And so we have lots of districts that were already trying to take advantage of that. But having the tuition-free path through the grant allowed them to be able to tap the shoulder on those leaders that they wanted to be able to pull into positions or prepare because they already demonstrated that leadership readiness. And so, we just graduated that first class last week, actually, and we had a 97. Thank you. We had a 97% retention rate from the cohort that started with us in August. And out of the apprentices that took the licensure exam by the time that we finished graduation. They hadn't all taken it yet, but we had a 96% pass rate. So they were able to get their licensure in the state. We did a lot of end of the year surveys with our different our different stakeholders, right? So we had the district coordinators, we had the mentor principals that were their clinical mentors, and we had the apprentices themselves. And, pretty consistently, obviously the tuition assistance and getting a free licensure program was cited as the most helpful design, a part of the design. But we also incorporate leadership coaching that's done in small groups that they do that's more practical based. And then we also set them up in small cohorts that they travel with, especially with a program so large. We want to try to personalize it, so we structure them into smaller cohorts. And so those were kind of the three elements that they were able to say was the most helpful. And I think, if I had to identify a couple of challenges, one is obviously funding sustainability, because the grant was not renewed for this year. I think that it was a state grant, but it was funded out of federal funding that came to the state. And with some instability there, that was a concern. And then the compliance load with so many, if we had had 10 or 15 apprentices, it would be a lot easier to manage. But some of the districts had 8 or 10 apprentices in one district. And so not only did they have the district level things, but then for each individual apprentice, that was a little bit of a challenge.
Thank you so much, Christy. First of all, huge congratulations on both the scale and the completion that you got to this year, to have just celebrated that first cohort. Getting over the finish line with such high retention is really remarkable. I think some of what resonated for me and what you just shared in terms of what you learned from your survey data, the importance of being part of a cohort and the small group coaching, and then, an affordable pathway, in this case, tuition free, seemed really important to the success of your apprentices, and is certainly what we see reflected in the research on high quality principal preparation. And then, I think that question of sustainability and funding, did Tennessee have an ABA grant through the U.S. Department of Labor, or were you using federal Title II funds to support the program?
They were using Title II funds for the apprenticeship last year.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you have some new challenges there, and I know we'll circle around on that topic. Others have more to share. You participated in the Pathways Alliance principal working group that developed the national guideline standards. And I was wondering if you could, one of the things for people who are newer to apprenticeship, understanding what the competency-based approach really looks like, if you could talk about the principal apprenticeship job competencies and how they align with the principal prep curriculum that you have at Austin P. Whether you could give us an example there that kind of helps bring it to life for people who are newer to apprenticeship.
Yeah, so we had a pretty detailed curriculum map already in place that was aligned to the professional standards and that sort of thing. But part of that mapping was also calling out all of the job embedded practical application sort of tasks that were embedded into the coursework. And so when we got ready for our apprenticeship application with the Department of Labor, we sort of did a crosswalk then of all of those activities and how they aligned with the 31 competencies. And so I created a second document that really mapped out what all those activities were and how they aligned with that. And so just to give you a couple of examples, in one of the courses, the students get registered as a certified observer using the Tennessee evaluation system, which is called TEAM. And then as part of their course assignments, they observe teachers' classrooms in their schools. and write up an observation report and give feedback. And in some of the schools, they actually use them as a certified observer. But even if the school isn't using the observation report, going through the activity is really valuable for them to be able to apply that learning. In the human resources class, they explore some recruitment and interviewing activities. But then coming out of that, they develop teacher interview questions with look for indicators that they could then use with a leadership team, so that to keep everyone on the same page. And so we really emphasize the importance of selecting the right teachers, and that sort of thing. So and some courses are a little heavier with some of those activities than others, just depending on what it is. But that was really the push, was the practical application of what they're learning.
Thank you. Those are rich examples, Christy. Thank you for sharing them. And I think, as folks in this webinar dig into the actual national guideline standards, that Sabrina, maybe we could drop them in the chat as well. You'll see a similar kind of crosswalk approach, but obviously there's a ton of flexibility in there. In this case, in the national guideline standards, as Lennon said, they are based on the PSEL standards. But in Christy's case, you're using Tennessee standards, Joe, and you were using Rhode Island standards. It's very adaptable to the state context, but designing those, the curriculum and then the assessments that link back to the standards and allow apprentices to demonstrate their competency in meeting those standards is really kind of at the heart of the apprenticeship. So I'm going to take us on to Kentucky next and invite Margarita and Stacy to share a bit about their program. And Margarita and Stacy, you both hold different pieces of Western Kentucky University's Principal Apprenticeship Program. And you also received a federal U.S. Department of Labor grant to support this work. You've even launched a pre-apprenticeship program into the principalship, which we're excited to learn more about. So, Margarita, I wonder if you can kick us off describing both your program's design and how the federal funding is enabling you to support it. And I know I'm seeing some questions in the chat around, like, what are the sources of funding? What are the grants? I think on this webinar, we're talking both in the case of Rhode Island and Kentucky, both of those states received a federal U.S. Department of Labor grant that allowed the programs to launch. Whereas in Tennessee, you were using your federal Title II funds that the state then sent down to support principal apprenticeship. So there's a little bit of different funding sources represented on the screen here. So Margarita, over to you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here and appreciate this opportunity to share. Back in 2016, WKU was a recipient of a Wallace Foundation grant in the University Principal Preparation Initiative. And at that time, we had really taken a very deep dive into our curriculum, and we had aligned everything that we were doing with the PSEL standards. So we had a really great framework when we moved into 2024, when we were the recipients of the ABA2 grant for the principal apprenticeship. But we knew we needed to make some changes to focus more on experiential learning. And my colleague Stacy will talk about that in a couple of minutes. But we wanted to take the opportunity because one of our big takeaways from the Wallace grant was for us to really work collaboratively, hand in glove with our partners. So we meet with our partners on a regular basis, and we ask, what are the barriers that are out there that are precluding people from coming in to principal prep? Because post-pandemic, we saw declines in the numbers of people who were coming in. And so we wrote our ABA2 grant with the focus on creating a pre-apprenticeship pathway into the apprenticeship, because we are a very rural area. Kentucky is primarily rural. We have 4 or 5 districts that are quite large, But most of our districts are very small. They're rural, they're town and gown kinds of things. And there's not enough people to create a pipeline like what you would see in Gwinnett or what you would see in Fayette or what you would see across the board. So we wanted to think about how can we help our smaller districts create this? And we did by developing this pre-apprenticeship pathway. It's called the Level Up Leadership Academy, or LULA, as we refer to it. And it is aligned with the learning outcomes and standards that we have assigned to our 2 incoming courses in the program, which are Introduction to Leadership and Creating a Culture of Achievement. And working with our partners, what we found is that if we could reduce the cost and reduce the time to certification, we are actually creating an incentive for people to come into leadership and experience it. So any student, any teacher in a district who decides that they want to join the Level Up Leadership Academy, they're not signing up for the apprenticeship. They are signing up to learn about what a leader does in a school. And so as we did that, we developed it with small little collaboratives or cooperatives of 2 or 3 little districts, a large district like Fayette County, which is in Lexington, Kentucky, Hardin County, which is up in the E-Town, it's a bedroom community of Louisville, Warren County, which is Bowling Green, where I am proper, and there's one other, and it's failing me.
No
Davis County, which is in the Owensboro area. So we took some larger areas, but then we created these smaller little collaboratives that are around them, and we developed programs. Some of them already had aspiring leaders programs, and we went in and we looked at their programs and we helped them align them to the PECL standards. We helped them align them to what our learning outcomes were, so that when students completed the program, within a year, they are able to come to WKU if they so choose and give us their certificate of completion. And we will give them 6 hours of articulated credit towards their program. This is nothing new for WKU because we are always looking for ways to support our districts and to help our students come in to make education affordable. We started out as a normal school, and we are the backbone of WKU, so we have brought people in that way, and then we've reduced the cost for them by about $2,100. But we also have in our partnership with these separate districts a way for the district to pay for, out of their Title II dollars or whatever funding that they have, some have foundations, a third of the tuition that goes towards the apprenticeship. Our $2,100 commitment through articulated credit goes towards that as well. Plus, we add in a little extra so that we are at a third as well, so that the district is paying a third for that individual. We're paying a third, and we've reduced the cost for the student down to a third of what the normal tuition would be. The LULA program is a year-long program. It's delivered in a PD model, but there are deliverables that go along with it. And the deliverables are based on what are the important pieces for the school district. So we let them co-design and co-develop the LULA program, meeting what our guidelines are and what our standards are and learning outcomes are, but we do it in a way that makes it fun. It's not the academic piece, it's still rigorous. But success for them is attending and being present, creating those deliverables that are done, and mastering some of it, and being able to demonstrate mastery through doing simulations and other pieces. So it prepares them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of similar themes across the 3 programs represented here in terms of the importance of that strong partnership with your district partners, and making it an affordable pathway for your participants. And then Western Kentucky, I think it sounds like you've really, done something that we see coming up as very important in the research is creating those pipeline programs. So through the pre-apprenticeship, right, Pat, the pipelines into the principalship as well, which are critically important. Stacy, I wonder if I could turn to you next. I know that Western Kentucky is also part of a national network of educator preparation programs, the Educator Prep Lab. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more on the partnership side. What's been your approach to collaboration and to shared learning in your program, both within the design of Western Kentucky's apprenticeship within the state and also outside the state with other ed prep programs?
So I have been at Western for around 10 years. And my first year at Western, we started to apply for the Wallace Foundation grant. And because of that grant, we had opportunities that regional comprehensive universities might not always have to learn from programs across the country and visit those programs and be present. So, and that's kind of what led us to be involved with the Ed Prep Labs as well, to kind of continue those collaborations and learning from each other. So just the networking that was involved there is invaluable. But it's not just that level of collaboration that we have invested in our program. So starting back 10 years ago, we have really partnered with our regional cooperatives and our school districts, and listening to them and listening to their concerns. And so I'll give you an example of a key shift that came about from these conversations. So we were focusing on instructional leadership, but our districts told us the students going into your program are already instructional leaders. We need you to work on their communication a little more and their operational management and safety pieces a little more. And so you see that reflected in how we've designed our apprenticeship experience, that we're listening to that as we develop those key learning experiences. We're district specific as much as we can be. We have a district partner who, after the last couple of years, of giving us input and being present, said they preferred a different model to the instructional experience, those technical hours, I guess. And so we have really done that in partnership with them, and that will launch next week. So we'll see how that goes. But just listening to them and getting their input and designing what meets their needs. And we're not in a large urban district, so we're not just serving one district, we're serving 50 districts across the state. Really, you could say we're serving any district across the state that's willing to partner with us. So that's one level. And then within Kentucky, also dating back 10 years, all of our educational administration programs, or 11 of them, meet every month with KDE. So we have monthly Zoom meetings for updates and collaboration that were a holdover from Wallace. And even before that time, there was collaborative work, but it's become a regular monthly meeting during the school year among the educational administration faculty, where we share and we learn from each other. So that's been really important. And like I said, we've worked with the Ed Prep Labs, and we've been a part of that work. And as a part of that work, I'll be doing some work with looking specifically at early childhood leadership. But we also share and collaborate with our professional organizations at both the teacher and administrator preparation levels. And another form of collaboration that we are struggling with, but productively struggling within our program, is we are collaboratively designing all of the apprenticeship experiences. So we have a lot of faculty with different expertise and different backgrounds and different qualifications working together to agree on exactly what courses will look like and how many points things will be and how we'll label them. and how the classes will flow and working at that level of collaboration. But every layer of collaboration has strengthened our program and has strengthened me as a professor as well to help me grow.
Thank you so much, Daisy. I think, we know how important that collaboration and the cohort model is for candidates themselves, and the same is true, right, of the folks leading the program and working in districts. And hearing all of our panelists share the complexities of collaborating with a large number of districts, like wow, 54 across the state of Kentucky is a lot, and a very complex set of relationships, I'm sure, to manage. I'm looking at the clock and I want to be mindful of time. We're going to wrap up this panel shortly. And before we get there, I guess I want to throw a question out to all of you. Christy, you shared a little bit already about how you are looking at results from your first year. You just finished year one, and how you're measuring success. I wonder if, Joe, I could come back to you, and Margarita, and Stacy. Now, how are you thinking about measuring the success of your program as you go forward? And what did you learn from year one, in your data? Joe?
Yeah, happy to start. In similar ways as Christy, we survey our apprentices and their mentors. And from that qualitative feedback, what we learned was just important information about, I think, what was powerful was the the work that was done that aligns to their practical implications in their residency has been really important for them as apprentices, and that's where they grew the most. Their partnership with their mentor. One of the struggles was the workload of being in a program, being in the role of an assistant principal, and demonstrating competencies that are specific to principal preparation. So we're thinking about that qualitative feedback that we're getting to redesign or to improve the program. In addition, we look at student impact data. And we had 3 of our 5 apprentices have significant impact on their identified focal group, which is a big part of our program, closing inequities in their school, which was great. And in our other 2 apprentices did have progress, not necessarily significant progress of closing an inequity, but that is something that we're really passionate about and something that we continue to measure.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those metrics that you're looking at. At Western Kentucky, how are you all thinking about it?
Stacy, you want to go ahead?
I will. So ours was actually a pre-apprenticeship program, so we're lagging behind a little bit. But this fall, we are admitting 3 cohorts of students, and about 2.5 of those cohorts, with about 10 students per cohort, are coming from LULAs, from pre-apprenticeship programs. So we think that's a pretty good early signal with launching those cohorts. So there is a lag because, again, this started as a pre-apprenticeship, and so we've had some students enter the program, but even our very initial first students won't finish their coursework until this school year. But long term, we want to look at matriculation into the program because enrollment is a challenge, and maintaining enrollment within the program. But then completion and certification rates through each level, comparing each level, and then placement into administrator roles. We have a lot of students who enter the program because they're already being hired into jobs as assistant principals or principals. So also looking at success of students who enter in that way versus students who complete the program and then enter administrator roles, and retention across the program. But again, we feel like we're a year or 2 behind, lagging with the data, as we collect that formal data. But we do try to bring our partners in about once a semester for feedback directly from them. But Margie can speak to that piece a little more than I can.
That, I mean, we collaborate a lot with our partners, and we are always asking them for feedback. We let them look at our curriculum to see how, if it's meeting what their needs are, and we get feedback from them as well. But the other way in which I'm looking at judging success on this is, one is, how sustainable is this going to be over time? Because once the ABA 2 grant is gone, we need to be in a place that we can maintain this momentum and keep it going. The other is the satisfaction of the faculty who are in the program. It's important for them to feel as though we have made a difference in the leadership that is out in our district. So getting their perspective and their feedback about what's going well in not just the pre-apprenticeship piece, but the coursework and the experiential learning pieces as well are very important. So making sure that the faculty are satisfied with what we're doing, and that our partners are on board with us are two of the pieces that we're really focusing in on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Margarita. I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to wrap up this panel. Please join me in thanking them all for unpacking their programs. I think they'll all be willing to be kind of contact folks for you if you're looking to launch a program yourself or strengthen an existing apprenticeship. There's a wealth of knowledge on this screen. So I'm going to pass the ball back to you, Sabrina, and to take it away.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually going to pass it on to London that will wrap us up with any NGS final thoughts before I close us out.
I appreciate all of the panelists being here today. And if there's a couple things that I'm walking away with, is that this is much more complex than just starting, a principal preparation program and then getting it approved by your state. Right? This involves leveraging existing infrastructure. It involves leveraging partnerships when things are already existing, rather than trying to build an entirely new system. And one thing that I just heard throughout the panel was just how essential collaboration is among state agencies. I mean, to be fair, here in Arizona, one of the state agencies that we've never really engaged with is sort of our Arizona Workforce Department, or Arizona Department of Labor. That's a new player that we are all interacting with in some way, whether it's the U.S. Department or a state level department or our local workforce boards. And so collaboration continues to just be so essential here. And then, lastly, I think the other thing that is really sticking out is just around sustainability, and really figuring out ways that we can marry, braid, leverage multiple sources of funding as we are thinking about these pathways, and to start at the very beginning of our planning of the implementation of a principal apprenticeship pathway, thinking about that sustainability, not just programmatically, but in some of the various pieces that we know will incur costs, and working across those state agencies with local private philanthropic partners. What I love about the Principal Effect is that it's a great report that I know you could give to folks in nonprofit who might hear a lot about the teacher shortage and might be working on that, but might need some more knowledge building around the role of the principal and why programs like a principal apprenticeship are so important. And so I encourage you, as you're thinking about existing infrastructure and collaboration around sustainability, to really leverage that report as a set of talking points, as an evidence base for these conversations. And so, we just encourage you to dig through the NGS standards, to think about them again as that flexible structural framework that you can use. As you heard today, people are implementing principal apprenticeships in lots of different ways in their state contexts. And we, of course, invite you to continue engaging with us at the Pathways Alliance as we explore ways that we can advance principal preparation efforts. And so with that, Sabrina, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any questions, but I will hold space for a few minutes if anyone would like to put any questions in the chat or use the Q&A feature. I think everyone did a wonderful job explaining everything. So as we close, I would like to echo London's sentiments and thank each and every one of you for joining us today. and really your just engagement. And thank you, our panelists, just for your thoughts throughout this conversation. We really hope today's session has offered both clearer understanding of the Pathways National Guideline Standards, as well as practical ideas that you can really carry onto your own work, whether you are at the beginning of exploring principal apprenticeships or already on the way to building an existing leadership pathway. The webinar recording, as I mentioned earlier, will be available shortly. We will also send all related resources over following today's session. We do encourage you to review them and continue to use them as a guide in your conversations with your states, with your districts, with your EPPs, and also the workforce. And again, a sincere thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your time, your expertise, and honest lessons, as we know that this was not an easy feat. So thank you for collaborating. Thank you for joining us today. Your willingness to share what this work really looks like is very important to us and very valuable to the space. So as we continue to strengthen the principal pipeline, it really does take real partnership across systems. And we are grateful that this community with so many people is committed to really creating that supported pathway. So we thank you, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.